This is a teaching for Bible-believing women, specifically women in the Torah movement, women who are observing the feast days. I have to warn you that it is in prophecy that you guys are going to go wrong according to the feast days, and that God is not very happy with you guys. So I'm going to start with the whole prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 4. If you read Proverbs 4:25, it says, don't go to the right hand, don't go to the left hand, walk in the narrow path. So this goes back to the prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 4. So Israel, he laid on his left side for Israel for 390 days, symbolizing their captivity that started in 722 BC when they got scattered into Assyria. Okay, if you multiply, okay, so here's the thing. When they got scattered into Assyria, and then they were in captivity for 390 years, after the 390 years, they were supposed to return and be ashamed. They did not do that. If you read Ezekiel 43, talking about the third temple, it says all these things, and then it says if they come back and are ashamed. But they did not return. So if you read Leviticus 26 about not being not returning, not being ashamed, the curse gets multiplied times 7. Okay, so 390 times 7, because they didn't return and they were not ashamed, is 2,000, around 2,730. Okay, so you add 2,730 plus 722 BC. I'll show you on here so it's easier to see. Okay, 722 BC adds up to 2008 if you add the times 7 curse. Okay, it'll bring you to year 2008. 2008 is when the curse started getting lifted off of people, and there was a huge surplus in people, the Torah movement, Messianic Christians, people leaving the Christian church and then calling themselves Hebrew roots. And we can see it right here. Around 2008, a notable uptick occurred in Christians leaving traditional churches to join the Hebrew roots Torah movement. Okay, they started observing Sabbath, which they picked up a polluted man-made one, because the biblical Sabbath is Saturday dawn to Sunday dawn. The evening to evening Sabbath was adapted when Judah got exiled into Babylon. Started, going back to the food laws, which is actually a covenant that God made with Noah, which was well before Moses' time. So if you hear Christians say, oh, well, we're not under the law of Moses, when you tell them that they can't eat swine's flesh, it's actually a covenant of promise that they're to be grafted into in Ephesians 2:12. Genesis chapters 6-9, Isaiah 65, end times prophecy of people who eat swine's flesh are going to get destroyed at the coming of Yeshua. And then they start doing biblical feast days. Okay, so the curse is lifted. People are starting to see Christmas is pagan, Easter is pagan, we're being lied to. And then they start doing the feast days. And this is in prophecy that they're going to do that. It's Hosea chapter 8. I'll start in verse 11. Because Ephraim has made many altars to sin, altars shall be unto him to sin. I have written to him the great things of my law, but they were counted as a strange thing. I'll explain that later in a little bit. I have written, they sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of my offerings and eat it. That means they do the feast days, but Jehovah accepts them not. Now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins, for they shall return to Egypt. They're gonna go into you will go into captivity if you are profaning Jehovah's feast days in Mystery Babylon. Okay, the great things of his law that they count as a strange thing. Well, it ties back to when the Messiah said to love God and love your neighbor. You can read Luke 10. When he's asked how to inherit eternal life, he says, what says the law? And then he quotes Deuteronomy 6 on how to love God, which is the keeping of the 10 Commandments. Read Deuteronomy 5, where God calls the 10 Commandments a holy covenant. And then loving your neighbor is Leviticus 19:17, and it means to rebuke them. So they count loving God and loving your neighbor as a strange thing, the great things of his law. And they also count Deuteronomy 12 and 16 as a strange thing, because Deuteronomy 12 and 16 are the instructions for the feast days, and you're only allowed to do the feast days in the land of your inheritance. That's why in Acts 18, Paul says, I by all means must keep the feast in Jerusalem. Why didn't he just stay? I forget where he was at, but he wasn't in Jerusalem. He didn't stay where he was at to keep the feast. He traveled to Jerusalem to keep the feast days. Daniel fasted through Passover in Daniel chapter 10. We are absolutely not allowed to profane Jehovah's feast days. And so they count that as a strange thing. They won't warn, watch, rebuke, which is love. They will not warn the Christian church, which is actually the high calling of the first fruits calling, Jacob my servant, the watchman calling, to warn them of their iniquity. Okay, instead of becoming a watchman and warning them of their iniquity, they have preeminence of men. They're still making a merchandise out of God's people. Like you can watch, don't watch them, but just to give you an example, like Adam, the parable of the vineyard, charging people hundreds of dollars to keep the feast or to do the feast with him, or charging people for tzitzits and selling their books that they make, and they're just, if not more wicked than the Christian church, because God poured out a certain amount of grace, a certain amount of knowledge, so that they can listen to that grace that teaches them to deny ungodliness, which is Titus 2:11 and 12, and so that they can start obeying God in spirit and in truth and warning the Christian church. But they didn't do that. In Hosea 5, it says they willingly walk after the commandment. That commandment is the royal law, and it means to watch. They willingly do not. They will not watch. They will not be a watchman, which also means that they turn back in the day of battle. Because we're battling with evil servants. We're battling, with the apostate Christian church, trying to find God's lost people. Read, the end of Hebrews chapter 10. For we are not as they who draw back, but onto the belief of the saving of our souls. Ephraim draws back in the day of battle. And then he turns the battle to the gate, which is Isaiah 28. And this is when the Messiah said, he put a porter in the gate. And what he says to the porter, he says unto all, watch. Okay? Turning the battle to the gate is watching, fulfilling the royal law. And those who are doing that, the Lord does not come upon like a thief in the night. This is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. But they are not watching. They are profaning Yah's feast days. So he's going to come onto them like a thief in the night. And he's going to acquire it at the shepherd's hands, Ezekiel 34. And then read Isaiah 22 as well, and Isaiah 66. He that killeth an ox as if he slew a man. He that something in oblation as if he cut a dog's neck. That's how he feels about people profaning his feast days. And Isaiah 56 calls them dumb dogs that cannot bark. The people who leave the Christian church, go into this Torah movement sect or whatever, they are not profitable. They are unjust stewards. Luke 16. They go to the letter of the law, and they say you have to wear tzitzits and 100% cotton clothing, and profaning Yah's feast days, and they'll go around trying to speak Paleo Hebrew. But Zephaniah chapter 3 says that he will restore his language when he makes all things new. And it also says he will gather those who are sorrowful over the feast days, because we're not allowed to feast right now. It's a time of lamentation, mourning, and woe. We're supposed to be watching, rebuking, teaching these things with all long suffering, proving all things, not quenching the spirit. And so denying prophecy is quenching the spirit, and these people are going to go into captivity. So be like the portion of Jacob. Jacob watches. Jacob doesn't turn back from the battle of the gate and pick up the high calling or go into great tribulation. Like, that's the severity of the situation. That's what prophecy says.